Yeah, that sounds like the Red Hot Stojack Peppers. What's up,
Nice.
everybody? Welcome to the Drummers Education Connection. We are here every Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. Pacific time to entertain you and talk to you and connect with you about all topics related to drumming and teaching and music and a little bit of life stuff in there too. My name is Jeremy Steinkohler. I'm here with my great friends Rick Stojack and Chip Ritter. We do not have our friend Bart Robley with us here today. He's on tour on the road right now, so we hope he's doing well and his shows are going great. And we'll look forward to seeing him in a couple of weeks. And we like to start our show off with a little quick discussion about what we call good things. So this is just a chance for us to check in each week and share some stuff that's going on for us that's going well. Focus on the positive, because the more you focus on the positive, surround yourself with positivity and positive people, the more your life feels more positive. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's true. You focus on you are what you eat, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you are what you eat.
Right.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. I tell all my students who are working through the Philly Joe Jones solos transcriptions, keep working on that stuff because you are what you eat. And the more you learn that stuff, the more it starts to come out in your playing. And you sound like you've been influenced by Philly Joe Jones when you learn his solos. All right. So we'll start off with good things. Rick, what's going on good for you, my friend?
Let's see. A good friend of our show, Larry Rodbell out in Maryland, who is a well-noted, respected, amazing guy and drum teacher, just celebrated his 25th year anniversary of teaching drums. So that is an amazing thing. So Larry,
Congrats.
Thank you so much for your contributions to the drumming community. And I just think that's a great thing. And so, and thanks for coming on our show. His episode, he was on maybe a few years ago, and so really, really good guy. And his students love him, and I'm seeing a lot of great work coming out of Larry. So that's
nice.
What's better than that? So
how about look at that? Look at that. Rick's good thing is someone else's good thing. I love it.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Chip, what's your good thing?
Well, I'm selfish. My good thing is I've been asked to speak at the citywide speaker meeting in Tucson, Arizona, on June 14th on Saturday at this big meeting that they have, and they all come to see the speaker, and it's going to be about 250 people listening to your boy.
Wow, so that's incredible, man!
It's going to be cool, man. I'm excited about it.
Congratulations!
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be invited.
Yeah.
What are you speaking about, Chip?
We're speaking about recovery and how you don't drink one day at a time in a program that I belong to that's anonymous. If you can imagine what the title would be.
Yeah.
I have to be anonymous at the level of press, radio, and social media.
Right.
I'm kidding.
Right.
It's AA. But it's going to be a good time. There's a lot of good people, and it's just a great cause.
Good for you, man. That's fantastic.
Jeremy? What's going on with you, man?
I love that, Chip. I love that you're a role model for people to talk and you're willing to talk about all the stuff you've been through and share your experiences to help people, go work through their own challenges. That's awesome, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm lucky to do it. How about you? What's going on good?
It's just kind of the usual run of the mill stuff. Had a great gig this past weekend at a art and wine festival in Walnut Creek. My son's coming home from college in a couple of weeks. Super excited to see him. And we're still working on putting together this album project that we're hoping to record this summer. And I should know by the end of this week if we are able to get the project funded. So cross my fingers for that. Hope to have a really great news announcement next week. Yeah. So that's it.
How do you get funding?
He's applied for a couple of grants.
Yeah.
And we're going to find out any minute about the first one he didn't get. And then there might be also a backup source of sort of a philanthropist who might be willing to support the project. So we're going to, I don't want to say any more about it at this point, but I'll let you guys know if and when.
We're in suspense.
Yeah, me too, for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
So let's see. The path of least resistance. And we'd love to hear from you guys who are listening about your stories with this and your thoughts about this and what this means for you and how what forms it may have taken in your drumming path or your your musical path or your life path, really. I want to kick it to you guys to start with this question, and this can be something we explore, sort of weave back and forth to over the course of the show today. Is the path of least resistance a good thing or a bad thing?
I can go.
Please.
Let me jump in. I'm going to go ahead and read you something that I was looking at this morning that really stood out to me. So I copied it so I could read it on the show.
Cool.
The path of least resistance refers to the route or approach that requires the least effort, energy, or opposition to achieve a goal or outcome. It's a concept rooted in physics where natural systems like water flowing downhill or electricity flowing to the easiest conductive path take the course that minimizes resistance. In human behavior, it describes the tendency to choose the easiest or most comfortable option, often driven by habit, convenience, or avoidance of conflict. For example, water flows around obstacles in a stream, following a path with the least physical resistance. Similarly, people may stick to familiar routines or avoid difficult conversations because those choices feel easier. However, the path isn't always optimal. It can lead to short-term ease, but long-term stagnation if it avoids necessary challenges or growth. Understanding this concept helps in decision-making, consciously choosing when to follow the easiest path versus when to confront the resistance for a greater reward. I thought that was pretty good.
That is really good. That kind of, okay, we're done. See you guys next week.
Now, I think the path of least resistance is like a rule that can be a tool that can be used to cook or burn the house down. It's
say more.
In context. If I'm trying to build a habit and it's something hard for me to do, like go to the gym and lose 20 pounds, the path of least resistance for me is just to put the gym clothes by the front door, because that just kind of triggers that goal, and it says, "Oh yeah, here they're I might as well put them on."
But wait, isn't the path of least resistance in that case not to go to the gym?
Well, that's one thing, but to put my clothes on is a first step, and I'm more likely to go to the gym if I get that thing moving, if I get some momentum.
Yeah.
So the path of least resistance, that could be if I chose to use it that way, not go to the gym's easier. Yeah. I think it's a good and bad thing. It depends on the context of where you're at in your life and what you're trying to do,
Yeah, I think that's right. That's Rick.
Well, I would say the path of least resistance is generally a good thing. We were going to talk about this episode. We were going to talk about drumsticks. That would have been a lot easier to just talk about how a drumstick is made, what sticks we use. But no, we had to talk about this. We did not take the path of least resistance.
That's right. That's right.
I think we're going to be glad about it because it's going to be thought-provoking in one way or another. And folks, we're not licensed therapists. We're professional musicians.
Disclaimer.
So there's something hopefully we've gained over the years in knowledge on this. So I generally like to look at the path of least resistance and follow that just in general. When things were going bad, like if a person was just beating their head up against the wall over and over and over growing up, like with my brother was having lots of trouble with his music career. But he was so like, I've got to make it happen. I've got to make it happen. This is the only thing. He'd say, if it ain't music, it ain't shit, and it had repercussions, that lifestyle for him in his case over the decades. And my dad would always say, you've got to know when to turn the wheel. You've got to know when to turn the wheel. And so I just think kind of measuring what you're doing and assessing what you're doing is a good idea. I'm not saying
just being aware.
Yeah, just be aware. It's like, well, why is there resistance?
Yes.
Maybe assess what the goal is. Why is there why because I need to be, this big professional actor or big professional musician or professional actor. Well, then what? So what? Is that really gonna make you happy? So you're
Right.
gonna beat yourself up and beat all of your family and friends up and
Yeah.
have a really difficult lifestyle just to get there. And then I always just ask, well, why?
Right.
Or
Right.
like I have to have a Cadillac. Well, why?
Right. Well,
Because it give me self-esteem. Well, why will it give you self-esteem? Well, because people will be impressed.
yeah.
Well, and then what? Well, people will be impressed, and then I'll feel good about all my hard work. And then what? And
Right. Right.
I just think,
Yeah.
look,
If you're not happy on the journey, you're not going to be happy at the destination. Yeah.
yeah, and it's finding that balance with pushing through, and yeah, I'm going to put effort into something. But a lot of times I feel like if we're enjoying, it's not work. If it's effort, but if it's not like this gruesome, ominous task,
Hmm.
Yeah.
well,
Like when a student's holding the sticks way too tightly and using all of their muscles to go as
Yeah.
fast as they can, when you're trying to explain them as a teacher, if you could learn to relax and go slower and develop your technique, you'll be able to be much more efficient.
Right.
And that will ultimately be least resistance for the energy you're spending to get the most result. Yeah.
right. It's interesting, Chip, this concept of how we often like we're trying to learn to play faster or teach people want to learn to play faster, and it's being looser.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And
That's
it
the
is
path of least resistance.
that's the path of least resistance at drumming, but I think maybe that's the path of least resistance in life. But I don't
Hmm.
know, I'm just a drummer, so
Hold on loosely, but don't let go.
yeah.
Hey, 38 spectrum. Boom.
Woo!
I like what you're saying there, Rick. I mean, I think a lot of times people there's the facts of an experience or what's happening or in your life or with your music or your career, and then there's the meaning that you attach to those facts, right? Like so,
Yeah,
you can say, "Oh, I want to be on the cover of Modern Drummer." Okay, you got on the cover of Modern Drummer. That's a fact. What does that mean for you? That's a whole other can of worms. And
Yeah.
and this is part of the problem people have with I think some of their goal setting and thinking or lack of thinking maybe about goals is they don't think about the why, and they don't think about what it means for them and what it means specifically to them as opposed to what it means in the world, because nobody cares if I'm on the cover of Modern Drum magazine except the people I know. In other words, I've known people to achieve these things and it hasn't really changed their lives in a meaningful way. um
absolutely.
so you got to be thinking about what's happening, and then there's the meaning that you attach to it, that it means for you.
Yeah.
you know
Like people that talk about wanting more money, I talk to them, and sometimes it's just like, okay, well, why? Well, because I can get this or I can get that. And I kind of boil it down and be like, I don't know if that's really true. I think the proper way to go about it is you want more money because of the sense of freedom it will give you, that the sense of security it could provide, or the sense of choices it would allow you to make more than you have. Like there's an underlying feeling that you would rather be driven towards, to be drawn towards, rather than to be running away from.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, another example, on the flip side, like I had one year two students that auditioned for the same high school jazz band, and one got in and one didn't. Or no, sorry, 2 different years and different students who didn't get in, and one of them, you know, just decided that meant she was not a good drummer, and that was the end of it, and she was never going to be any good, and that was the meaning that she attached to that experience. Like, well, all that means is that, and to me, I said, is that there were other drummers who were more experienced than you who also auditioned.
That's all it means.
Right. But for her, she attached all this stuff to it, and that changed her path. I had
Yeah.
another student who didn't get in as a freshman, and he decided that was going to make he was going to work harder and redouble his efforts to practice, and he ended up getting into the top group 2 years later. So
Yes.
it really, yeah. So anyways, but back to the path of least resistance. I think, can you guys give me some examples of where the path of least resistance is a good thing?
Yeah. When you work for something that you couldn't do, and you've put effort in, and then you have success with it. Like exactly like what you're talking about with your student. That's, I've seen a lot of students. It may be like a trend now with maybe the up and coming generations, where they try soccer, they try football, they try a little bit of everything, and then don't really put much effort into it and don't stick with it, and then they're just kind of trying to find the one thing that just came easy to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely a trend. I have mixed thoughts about that, because what they do is they lose that ability to progress
Right.
and build up characteristics of progression and moving forward and discipline. So
Yeah.
so with- where if you just put a little, sometimes you have to put a little effort into anything,
Sure.
and when you get on that, and then what happens is you've earned something. You've earned, like, I worked really hard. I worked on these drum lessons. I learned to read music, and I got a gig, and that gig feels so good because it didn't come easy, easy, easy.
But the question was, when is the path of least resistance a good thing?
Um,
I agree with everything you're saying.
yeah, but when is it a good thing? I think sometimes when you just let things, sometimes it's when you let things flow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you just are I like trying to get I'll bring up I don't know if I can articulate this well. Um, my ex-wife used to smoke cigarettes, and I would badger her
Mm.
about it. And she would, so I was always pushing forward to, "You should quit, you should quit, you should quit," or "I don't like being around cigarettes," or
Right.
man, all of the nasty things associated with smoking. And then so I was pushing, pushing, pushing,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, "You know what? The more you say it, the more it just makes me want to smoke."
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
and I think the path of fleet, if I had just like let it flow and not said anything, there might have been, if I had just, I was pushing and resisting, right? I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
resisting the scenario. Life happens. Life is what it is, and if you
Mhm.
push against it, you know, then you usually don't get a good result. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm totally answering
No,
the
you are. That's a good
yeah.
one. Yeah. How about you, Chip? You got any thoughts about that?
When the path of least resistance was a good thing, most recently, the thing that comes to my mind was an argument with my brother deciding to buy a Corvette. He's against the purchase decision. And he started listing off all these. I could have easily gotten to a big fight with him over this topic. And the path of least resistance was to be like, oh, okay, I understand your position. Right on. Well, what's next? What do you got going on today? Changing the subject,
Right.
disengaging from the conversation or the argument, to do a Bruce Lee, to take their energy and kind of just be a rock in the water, let his water flow this way.
Yeah.
And in that way, I became the water that went to the smoother part. And I didn't have to get all whatever angry. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does. Yeah, yeah. I had someone tell me the other day that one of the best lines you heard when to deal with conflict is to say, because it's so easy to get riled up and someone says something you completely disagree with. And so,
Yeah.
especially online, you see all those crazy people getting into
Mhm.
fights and stuff. And, if you just say, you might be right.
You might be right with that.
You might
Yeah.
be right. Then
Yeah,
it's
you
like,
might be
it sort
right.
of diffuses it. It's
That's a
instead
good
of pushing
one.
it. Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's over.
yeah, that's a really good one.
Right. I thought so too. Um,
I, you know,
I've had, go ahead, Rick.
I'm trying to stay off the news a little bit. I'm feeling that's a little bit of path of least resistance.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. That's a
Yeah.
hot button issue, but I don't have my head completely in the sand. But man, if you could put a lot into what's going on in the world and get really, really stressed
An
out.
old friend of mine once told me, when I was all caught up with a lot of that, he once told me, he sat there and he said, okay, look, I said, yeah, but I got to know. I need to be informed.
Mhm.
You know, I'm not going to be ignorant and sit around and do nothing. And, you know, and he goes, it's one thing to be aware and informed. It's another thing to inundate yourself,
Yeah.
you know, to just junkie
Yeah.
out on it and
Right.
obsess on it and
Doom
turn
scroll.
it into all you ever talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
I've
life
had-
is out here, like Rick said, life is life. It is what it is. You're going to either live your life or not. Whether the prices of gas go up and you like that or not, you still want to drive your car.
Yeah.
So you might as well just go drive your car, dude, and focus on your goals.
I've had this experience with some of my students. Tell me if this resonates, where they kind of get in their own way a little bit.
Yeah.
And they stop themselves from making progress as well as they could because they're hung up on something that there's something they're pushing against. There's some resistance that they're putting up for themselves. It's like, maybe I need to be better. I should be better than I am, or I think, they think they're better than they are, or whatever it is. Or they're trying to do too much with their playing, and they're not just going with the flow of the groove. I mean, we talk about, I mean, it's such a perfect metaphor, water flowing around a rock or whatever, path of least resistance for playing, for grooving, right? When we're grooving on the drums, there's an effortlessness, a feeling of effortlessness, like you're being in the zone. So, right, you've heard that expression in sports a lot, where you're not conscious of it. You're just doing, and it feels easy, and you're not pushing against, and there's no friction, right? It just flows.
That's the path of least resistance, right?
That's
there.
it. That's
Right.
it. Yeah.
And people tense up their muscles, like you were saying, Chip. I have a student who's super tense all the time, and we work so much on just relaxing the muscles and relaxing the mind to be able to get to a physical state of flow, so that the playing feels less effort, like it's less effort, and there's less resistance when you're doing it well. Right. And it's so hard for people to get around to that because they're trying and they're squeezing and they're pushing and they're moving their arms, and the shoulders are up by their ears, and it's like, boy, that's as much as that you're trying, that's actually not helping you. You're trying in the wrong way.
Yes.
Right. It's like the Chinese finger trap. That thing.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
stick your fingers on either side, and the harder you try to pull, the more stuck your fingers get. Right. You have to kind of go the opposite direction to be able to pull your fingers out.
Yes. Of course, as a teacher, we teach a lot of people to play charts, right? And of course, you want to try to learn everything note per note, but there's certain stuff there might be a part in a chart. Let's say you're a level 2 drummer or 3 drummer, and for instance, to try to measure it. Let's say the song is generally level 2 or 3, but there's a fill that's a level 8, right? And I've seen so many drummers, they'll just got to get that fill and get stuck on that, rather than let's just do a student version of that. You're going to grow as a drummer. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to have some success.
Don't grow into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And instead they insist on trying to play it note for note, and they don't play it well, and it's clunky, and there's a little bit of timing issue. And like, what did you achieve there? Right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what my whole book series is, where you have, hey, here's the beat to a song, and you could just play along to it. You don't need to play the song perfect note for note, but you're enjoying grooving and you're working on technique and your time.
When I have students that are trying to learn a really complicated, whatever, a hard beat song like Spin Doctors from Two Princes, I always think of your book and pull out different beats that simulate it, that are simpler. Student versions, training wheel beats, I call them.
Right.
Yeah.
So it matches the song, but it also allows them to have fun while they listen to what they're playing and learn the drum part.
Yes. That's
That to me is resistance.
The Drummer's Resource. Have you guys ever listened to the Drummer's Resource podcast? There's over 500 of them. Nick Ruffino, Nick, I forgot his last name right now. He was an Aquarian artist. His podcast was so incredible. And one of the interviews, and forgive me, I don't remember who he interviewed in that episode, but the drummer said, "Don't lose a groove over a note."
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so.
Well, all this is like, think of the path of least resistance. It's like, here's the positive side of it, and this is what we're wrapping up here: going with instead of against.
Right.
right? You're going with the groove instead of against the groove. And
Yeah.
that's true with your playing. That's true with your interpersonal band dynamics. You know,
Yes.
how important, how important is the battle that you think you need to fight?
Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Yeah. Do you want to be right and or controlling? Is it a control issue, or do you want to be like, you know what? I can let that go and let that person have that thing, even if it's not what I would want to do. It's not even what I would want for the band. Oh, I think we should dress in red. They think we should dress in yellow. You know what? I'm just going to go with yellow because we're going to get past this more quickly and not have to belabor it. I'm making this up, but
I focus on a wise man once said, I need to focus not so much on what needs to be changed in the world, but what needs to be changed in myself and my attitudes.
yeah, right. There you go.
Wow.
That's perfect. Perfect way to sum that up. So, next thing I want to ask you is, when is the path of least resistance not a good thing?
When not going to the gym is the path of least resistance.
That's a good one. I got one for you if I can jump in.
Yeah.
I write about this in my book. There's actually a chapter in my book called "The Path of Least Resistance." So it's a topic I've thought a lot about.
That book.
That's the book, Finding the Groove. Thank you, Rick.
Okay.
And thank you for. I've had a couple of people this week. Every now and again, I get an email or a DM from a stranger who's read the book and just tell me how much they loved it, which is always really gratifying. And as a matter of fact, one of the guys who reached out this week was Michael Scott, who has a great drumming podcast of his own, and we're going to have him on as a guest in July. So looking forward to that.
People tend to like randomly say I like it. People like Peter Erskine, huh?
Yeah, that wasn't random, but yeah, that was pretty cool.
Some guy named Peter.
Yeah. Thanks. Anyway, so the pathway. So I think that for a lot of us, we get so used to a certain way of thinking that it just becomes the default response to a lot of the situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think for a lot of us, we learned it early from whatever social situations or bad parenting or whatever. Or maybe it's just stuff we is our own baggage for whatever reason. We doubt ourselves and we make ourselves small, and we go to the place of self-loathing or imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it. And it can get to the point where it's just reflexive. It's just like automatic. You've done it. It's the way your brain works. So, you see, for example, you go out and you see a show and you see a drummer. The drummer is good, you think. And all you think, instead of, wow, that drummer's good, is you think, oh, I'm not that good.
Right.
It's all about comparison, or I can't do this, or I'm never going to be this, or whatever. That makes me feel bad about myself. To see a little kid crushing it at 10 years old, that makes me feel bad about myself. Again, this is that whole thing we talked about earlier about the meaning you attach to it, right? The fact is the kid is good. The fact is the kid can really play. Yes. How you feel about it, that's your baggage that you're putting on it. But again, so the path, I think for some people, there's this sort of path of least resistance of like, self-doubting, self-hating, insecurity, feeding that negative energy.
It's a proven fact that it's easier to be negative than it is to be positive in the beginning of a thought.
Yeah.
We have letting go of old thought patterns and behaviors dies hard.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right. And so this is what I mean about the path of least resistance. So that becomes the path of least resistance because it's so well traveled.
Because you're familiar with it.
Right. And it's almost on some level, it's serving you on some level.
Yeah, we get a misshapen pleasure out of it.
Right. But it ultimately it's not. Right. So it serves some function for you in the short term by and it could be, it's specific to you. This is where you go to therapy to figure this shit out. But in the long term, it's stopping you from being the best version of yourself. Right.
My brother talks about this type of thinking, what you were just talking, and he's always saying it's all about perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about your perspective. Like when the psychiatrist, they took the little kid who was totally optimistic. He was always happy, and his parents were like, "There's got to be something wrong with him. He's always happy. He's always joyful. He never cries. And the psychiatrist put him in a room full of a pile of horse crap. And the kid got excited and started digging into it. And the psychiatrist came into the room and said, "What are you doing?" And the kid said, "With this much horse crap, there's got to be a pony around here somewhere." It's perspective.
He was trying to find the groove in there.
Yeah, he was trying to find the groove.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a thing to be thoughtful of, like here's another one. When you're playing, I've had I've talked about this with some of my students. They're playing and they're sort of in that zone. They're feeling it, feeling good, and then something distracts them from that. And it could be someone walks in who, they want to impress, maybe another drummer, maybe it's even the drum teacher, or maybe it's some girl or boy they want to, make a good impression on, or some other musician. And all of a sudden they do something different, motivated by that thing, by that subconscious.
Their state changes. Yeah.
Their what changes? State. Yeah. And then they do something that pulls them out of the groove, because they weren't just kind of feeling the music and listening to the music and being present. Their ego got involved somehow, and they did something. I was like, I shouldn't have done that. I felt myself pop out of the, get rough with the groove there for a minute, because I was trying to do something. I was like, why did I even do that in the first place?
What did Bruce Lee say? He said something about I'm gonna murder this, but Bruce Lee said that conscious thought is the biggest hindrance towards fluid movement.
Yeah. Kenny Werner, I don't know if you guys know Kenny Werner. He's a jazz.
Yeah, I love that book.
Jazz piano player from New York. He wrote a book called Effortless Mastery, which I highly, highly recommend. And he talked. I've been to a couple of his seminars where he sort of just gives a talk about this stuff, and he talks about that a lot, about the sort of the editing brain, or the conscious brain getting in the way of the part of your brain that knows how to do what you want to do and does it effortlessly and well. And he talks about, when you sit down into a hot tub, when you're first getting into a hot tub, you have that sort of few seconds of sort of blissful, relaxation, where there's nothing in your head and you're just physically present, very present in that feeling, and trying to aspire to play music from that place where you're not attached to the results of what you're doing, and there's no judgment that's constantly entering your head about what you're doing, and you're just doing it.
Yeah,
without attaching meaning to it.
You're full of appreciation for the moment.
Yeah, right. Being fully present. I think that's very, very, very powerful stuff. And I think, for me, what that's helped me do in my own playing is use, when I notice those thoughts that are those distracting thoughts or the ego-based thoughts, I'm much more aware of noticing them, because there's that thought. And instead of sort of getting angry at myself for having the thought, I just kind of let it go by and use it as a trigger to refocus on paying attention to the, listening to the music.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
It just makes me think, like, working with nature and let things flow.
My mom, in my book, Stick Tricks and Showmanship, I'm writing a chapter.
Oh, come on.
You can see on chipritter.com. I'm writing a chapter called The Artist, and I dedicated that one to my mother, who is a watercolor artist, and she gave art lessons in our garage growing up. And she'd tell me many times, she goes, I can't tell you how many times a young person has said, I can't draw a straight line to save my life. And my mother would always say, how many straight lines do you really see in nature?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the path of least resistance, is the most natural thing as far as nature goes. And it's something that we could learn a lot from by just thinking about, especially in traffic. When I'm in traffic and I've got to get somewhere, I'm not on the path of least resistance. But when I'm just chilling and I'm listening to my music and I've got my head in the clouds, but my hands on the wheel, I end up catching all the green lights and things just move the way they should. And, do you ever notice that's a state of mind? That's a perspective. That's a position that you take in life when dealing with things.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. Traffic. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Think about all the
Oh, I'm
people
not
you
saying I do it. I'm not saying I'm
no,
capable
it
of
doesn't
doing it
matter.
all.
It doesn't matter. But think about all the people you know that get really frustrated in traffic. I mean, I've certainly been there, and it's a lot. It's very, very common. Think about all the road rage that happens because of
Oh
traffic,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then you can imagine. Of course, that getting angry doesn't help you get anywhere any faster. And
Nope.
then you can imagine, a different person who's like, oh, there's traffic today, so it's going to take me longer to get where I wanted to go than I thought it might, or than I wanted to, and that's
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is that a lot of times I think we humans think we know what's good and what's going
Mm,
to work out well and what's ideal. And I think the more that you just let go of that and just have that inner peace and belief and faith and passion, then I think things flow a lot better, you know?
Yeah. A good friend of mine used to teach me about goal setting, and I mean, he is a very successful musician, and he used to talk about setting a really big shiny goal and then forgetting about the middle part, just focusing on what is the smallest next right move,
mm.
and just getting your head down to that right move and having that trust that it's gonna work out the way the universe wants it to.
Yeah. I think we're all goal oriented people, but you got to be careful with goals, man.
Mhm.
That shit can mess you up.
Well, that's
You
that's
know, I'm
that's
a
I'm not
goal.
talking about being specific. Like when I
Right.
talk about goals, I'm talking about like I want to be a professional musician.
Right.
How that ended up happening is can manifest in a lot of ways. You
Right.
know, I
Yes.
don't have a specific at the end of the goal. I make sure that when setting a goal like that, I'm flexible in my approach.
Right.
I want to
Exactly.
publish. I'm publishing my book. That's a goal.
Mhm.
I'm
Right.
not going to be careful about how good that goal is going to feel because that's what I want. So to get to where I want to go, I set that goal. But then the next move is just finish chapter 8. It's not do the whole book, worry about publishing, worry about advertising, and all this other junk that I can't control because I'm
Mhm.
not there.
Right. Well, Chip, I think I'm a big, I'm very pro goal setting, and I'm referring to being responsible with goals or knowing how to work with goals. You're the pinnacle example of a goal setter. You don't just write it down like I'm going to be a pro basketball player. you know, you have something that's tangible but does require effort, and then you've got a systematic approach to it, a very
that
practical
that
approach.
approach, well, that approach for me happens to be the path of least resistance in
Mm.
Yeah,
this total scenario.
that's it. Rather than bull in a china shop with something that's not practical or
Not brute force. Yeah, it's more
yeah,
Bruce Lee than brute force.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly, yeah. Um,
The older I get, the more interested I am in Buddy Rich and Bruce Lee and Michael Jordan. For some reason, Buddy Rich and Bruce Lee, I get my fill of them, and I kind of move away, but then I come back. And when I come back to the same material, I'm learning things stand out to me that I never really thought of when I read quotes from Bruce Lee. You can Google quotes Bruce Lee and find brainy quotes and just read some powerful things that man said.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Very cool.
This
He said, "Be like water, my friend." It can crash and smash things, but it can also just flow.
yes.
So you got
Uh
to know
And
when to
doesn't
hold.
leave a bad taste in your mouth.
No, it doesn't.
yeah. I think about Dak that in a lot of ways Dak was we all wanted to do something. We didn't know what it was exactly. We're 4 years in and we're still trying to figure out what it is, but we're enjoying it, and there's some work involved. Um, but we all enjoy generally all of the things that go into making it making it happen, and,
Yeah.
and we're, there have been times when, because folks, this isn't easy to do a weekly show for 4 years. It requires effort and energy. And sometimes it feels like, man, I've got to, like it's so involved and like you kind of resist it but usually it's just like a headspace, and then it's just like we get on the air and the thoughts start flowing. And so sometimes there've been topics that we've picked that I've thought, oh man, that's a really tough topic. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to contribute to that. I don't know if I have much to offer on that. And then it's just a story I tell in my head, and it's just me resisting.
Mm.
Uh, And and then a lot of times you just let all that go and go, well, let's see what happens. And then, man, things just flow.
There's there's a difference between resistance and effort, right?
Right. That's it.
Right. I
Very
mean,
good. Good
Yeah,
point, Jeremy. Good point.
really good. There it is, Jeremy.
people think, oh, path of least resistance. Think about what you're talking about, not going to the gym. That's the least amount of the path of least effort. But
Right. Yeah.
you know, often, uh, to get anything, you're going to have to put some effort into it.
Yeah.
And as we know, like it's its own reward. Like you hear yourself getting better. You make progress. You make it into the band. You make it into the gig, and you can congratulate yourself on the hard work you put in to make that happen, because it doesn't come from nothing. And I think for a lot of people, they forget. Like I have adults who come in and they're professionals at what they do, and as a professional nurse or lawyer or a mechanic or plumber, they've put in all these years of effort to learn the trade and be good at what they do, and then they come back and they're beginners all over again, sitting down on the drum throne.
Mhm.
And it's humbling, and it's a reminder. I always find it inspiring, because it's like, oh, like, look at these people who are already very accomplished at what they do be complete beginners again, and how inspiring it is to like always be curious and always be learning and always be changing and always be growing. um yeah, right. James just made a comment. He said, I think that the least resistance is often confused with safest or easiest, and
Uh,
it's not necessarily, you know as we talked about today, it's not the same thing.
Yeah,
yeah.
you know what, guys? Can I read something else?
Sure.
Yeah.
I asked my AI friend, what's the relationship between the path of least resistance and effort? And it came back with minimizing effort. The path of least resistance inherently involves expending the least amount of effort to accomplish something. Effort as a counterforce, choosing a path that deviates from the least resistance, one typically requires more effort. For instance, breaking a habit or pursuing a challenge goal demands conscious effort to overcome the natural inclination to stick with familiar, easier patterns.
Right.
And examples of it: physical systems. Water flows downhill along the easiest route, requiring no effort from the water itself because it lacks agency. Human behavior: choosing to scroll social media instead of studying is a low effort path, but studying requires deliberate effort for greater long term reward. And societal systems: people may conform to social norms, least resistance, rather than challenging them, which requires significant effort. That's
Right.
pretty good.
Yeah. Cheap.
Your AI friend is smart. We should have that guy come in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I
Maybe
asked it to teach me a drum lesson as if I was as if it was a military drill instructor. Oh man, it was hilarious. All right, new recruits, grab your sticks. We expect great, all this stuff. It just went through paradiddles and double strokes and single strokes to 80 BPMs and keep to it or I'm gonna have you running laps around the drum set, stuff like that. It was cool.
Wait, that's how I normally teach. So how about you guys who are listening, David and Fred and Jim and James? What do you guys think about?
David,
Yeah, David. Actually, yeah. Let's share David's comment. Not my original thought, but it has been said: just as wind moves around natural obstructions, seeking the path of least resistance, should we always attempt to move around the structures of our lives, getting by with as few hassles as possible, Rather, it has been suggested that we should address the obstacles in enabling our creative energy to flourish rather than dissipate.
I like that.
I like
Thank
that
you,
too.
David.
Yeah.
So, what about some specific examples, like with students? How's it manifested with some of your students, guys?
How is what? Clarify the question. How has path of least resistance manifested?
Yeah, like have you seen anything in a good way or a bad way with your students? Um, you know,
Well, I've definitely seen what David was talking about there, where people don't want to do that. They don't want to work on any obstacles. They
Yeah.
have a they have a
block.
they have a block, or they see me do what I do and then say, "Oh, you're just a natural." And they don't understand. No, I really, really worked for this. This took decades and decades to do.
Right.
And they think that they should just be a natural. And if they could just overcome in little increments and take on those challenges, they would evolve. So sadly, I've seen some people disappear from drumming. And well, maybe I'm going to try karate. Maybe that's a little bit easier for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You challenge them harder than they wanted to be challenged.
Right. And then I'm really, really, really proud of this too. And I think it's just amazing. I just did the math. 30% of my students have been with me for 5 years or more.
Wow.
And those people are kicking ass. And it is, and it's not just flow and easy for all of them. They definitely put effort in. And
do you find that some students want to avoid working on certain things because they're really hard for them and they're just not fun because they're so painful?
Absolutely. Or they really, in this day and age where they just a lot of them, especially the younger people, still come in, they don't play the instrument, but they're bringing in their set lists of all the songs that they want to learn. And I've got to kind of reach back and, let's do something that is tangible for you. And you want to like help them reach their goals, and you want them to play that song, but you've got to take baby steps, I guess is what
I like to find in my students, I'm always kind of thinking about finding that one spark in that specific person I'm working with. They're all different, but I'm trying to find that little spark, because everybody's got something that brought them to drum listens in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And getting into that reason, trying to find that reason and fulfill them is my ultimate goal, because I want to bring them happiness and I want their parents to be happy as well. So I've tried to find like their favorite song, even if it's too complicated, and try to get them listening and playing, and at least, if nothing else, clicking their sticks in time to it. Things like that, I find is the path of least resistance for me as a teacher to get them to do something.
So I know some teachers who not drum teachers per se, but some other guitar teachers and whatnot, who, when the students come in each week, this teacher says, "What do you want to work on today?" So it's very students drive the show, and their approach is like, "Well, I just want to give the students what they want, and I'm trying to help them. You're here because you want something, and I want to help you get what you want."
Yeah.
And then there's then sort of on the flip side of that, there's like, okay, if
here's
you want
what we're working on. Yeah.
Well, yeah, right. Here's what we're working on. Then this is more my approach. Like, if we've discussed your goals and we know you want to get here, I'm going to tell you what to do to get there. And it's going to be work, and you have to do this, this, and this. And I'm with you. We're on the same team to try to get to this place, to get you to this place. But it's not like, oh, what do you want to do today? Because to me, that's that too many people are just going to, just do stuff that's easy or comfortable.
Exactly why I do the goal thing with them. And that's exactly right on, Jeremy. I mean, I've always visioned myself as a teacher as a safari guide.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go climb that Kilimanjaro. Here's the machete. I can point in the direction, but you're going to have to do the chopping.
Right.
I could see you in the safari hat, Chip. And
that'd be fun.
Outfit. I can totally see that.
I've got a student who like, came in and said, I really want to improve my fills. So, okay, great. I've got a whole plan for that, and working on the plan, and they're struggling learning these 16th note subdivisions and sequences, and they're like, this just seems like, I have to count it. It just hurts my brain. It's not, it's so much more work, and I just don't feel like I'm getting where I want to go, because it just feels like it's grunt, very in the weeds kind of work. And I'm like, well, this is why you can't do what you want to be able to do, because you don't have that skill, because you haven't done that work. And I know it's hard, but like, this is the stuff, whereas you could say, oh, path of least resistance,
It's interesting because I think we are all trying to get our students to get better. And a lot of them come in, they just want to be happy. And so keep the student happy, get the student better, and they may not be happy if they're working all day long trying to get better. Go ahead, Chip.
It's got to be our next show topic: happy versus better.
Well, it's not a versus, right? I mean, for some people maybe, but
well, perspective, like we've
that's
talked
right.
about,
That's right. And we're all wired differently, right? So some people will come in and they're ultra disciplined, and they're already, exercise 4 days a week, and they're very buttoned down, and everything is productive, and so they're there to work, and that's the enjoyment. And for other people, they're not so organized, and not so driven, and not so disciplined, and they want to come in and they want to jam, and they want to kind of keep it fun and keep it loose, and they learn a little bit, they get a little better over time, slowly. That's cool with them, right?
I think to maintain a student long term, you've got to get them better and somehow figure out a way in there to keep them happy. And I think that's the balance of a good educator. Because some of them, it's like, man, if they're not happy, they're really, I know they're going to go away. So I feel like, oh, this week, I just kind of need to keep them a little bit happy. And then we'll this is just the first inning of the game. Let's get them back. Next week, we're gonna get you better. And it's just being patient with people and working with them.
Yeah, I do think that flexibility is important, and people are going to have bad days, and some people, again, wired differently, like they're not always going to want to come to work in the way that you want them to work. But I'm not sure happy is the right word. I mean, for me, that is, I like, I feel like, sort of as a fundamental principle as a teacher, that if I can offer people something. Okay, let's look at this. Let's look at something in terms of difficulty. Let's say Chip comes in and he wants to learn this thing, and I show it to him.
New Orleans groove.
No, you already got that. Like 5 seconds. But, let's say Johnny comes in and he wants to learn this thing, and I show it to him, and it's way too hard. Well, that's a recipe for frustration, right? Like he's going to end up, even no matter how hard he works, it's not going to get there, or not going to be satisfying, because he doesn't have the baseline level stuff to get there.
Right.
And if I give him something too easy, okay, that could be fun for a minute, but then it's like, oh, well, this is kind of boring now. I can do this and it's easy, and I'm not. Right?
Yeah.
So, like, as a fundamental principle, I'm always thinking about giving students, I think this is my job, to give students something that is challenging, but that they can succeed with.
That's why I always tell them, if they're working on something as speed or coordination, whatever they're working on, while they're practicing, to be their own drum coach, and make sure they check 0 being easiest, too easy to do, 10 being impossible, too hard to do, to always be working around a 5, 6, 7 area of you're struggling a little, you're putting effort in. It's not all easy, but you're actually doing it, and you're actually making progress towards the goal.
Yeah. Because I think that feeling of, like, what you're describing as happy, Rick, to me, what's maybe we
accomplished,
satisfied, or whatever, enjoying, comes from that feeling of effort and progress, and recognizing, oh, I can do something I couldn't do last week.
Right.
Some of my drum students are just stoked to be able to hit the drum set. They're just
Right.
stoked to be there. They're like, okay, what do I do now? And
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
great feeling. It's so cool. I have a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old is doing this hot dog watermelon stuff that we're working on. And I looked over at him and I went, wow, how did you do that so good? And he looked at me and he goes, I'm just good.
That's awesome.
It was a good story, man.
That's really good. That's
I'm
really
just
good.
good.
Oh man,
That's a
It
good.
was awesome.
That's a nice place to wrap up. Well, thanks you
Yeah.
guys for tuning in. As always, next week we're gonna have our friend Fred Fisher on as a special guest.
Fred Rock.
And what did we say our topic? Oh, Fred, you don't even know this yet, but our topic next week is going to be bouncing back, overcoming setbacks.
Yes.
And we thought you'd be a great person to talk about that. So yeah, thanks you guys. We appreciate you so much for checking us out each week and tuning in and offering great comments and perspectives. And we hope to see you next week.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to give you, I call this loop Flea. I'll give you Flea with bongos.